I think what gardens teach us about life is that you should always be hopeful. To have this place in the center of a city is very valuable.
When I talk about the garden to people, I'm like, well, go for the beauty, but listen to the story and make sure you talk to somebody that tells you the story, because the story is what will resonate with you. You'll make a connection with this garden in a different kind of a way than you will just to the physical beauty.
I've retrieved from the archival boxes 2 pretty important folders of materials related to Peggy Abkhazi's internment and Nicolas Abkhazi's time as a prisoner of war. So we'll just have a little look here. So these are records related to her internment. And this is Nicholas's prisoner of war identification tag made out of wood.
My name is Konstantin Gavtaradze. I'm ambassador of Georgia to Canada. Chamusuli var Victoriashi, Abkhazis Bakhshi.
Now I realize how dense it is.
Yes. Well, this she created as a closed area. She wanted that feeling, like a room, like you're walking into a safe space. This was her feeling of this. This is a woodland area, so she's trying to create this feeling of being encircled. She's using a Chinese aesthetic throughout the garden. Minimalistic, more textures and tones than it is splashy display.
Is that natural that
Yeah.
these trees grow like this?
Well, she would prune, you know.
So they did it.
Yeah, they would prune.
I read a small piece of an article in a very small Georgian magazine. The title of the article was Garden of Love. And it was talking about some garden in Victoria, co-heritage of a Georgian nobleman, Abkhazi. There the article came to my mind when I was appointed as an ambassador to Canada. One of the first visits that I had to provinces was actually to BC, to Victoria, and to Abkhazi Garden.
I have to repeat my jokes here.
It's a new audience.
I'd like to thank you for your amazing and wonderful job you do here. This site is much more than just the horticultural heritage. It's a piece of history. And here, by developing it, by maintaining it, by taking care of it, you are actually preserving that history.
It's immensely important to understand what this garden has, what importance this garden has for Georgians, to understand that historic context. It's associated with Abkhazi family. This noble family, princely family, who for centuries ruled one of Georgian provinces called Abkhazia. Abkhazis were the family that always stood up for Georgia's independence and freedom. The name of the first Georgian state in 1918 was Georgian Democratic Republic. So many hopes, so many new things, such a great involvement of this family, including Nicholas himself, into this new Georgian Republic. And suddenly, all these hopes are broken, disappeared, because the foreign military invasion in February 1921. Father of Nicolas Abkhazi, Konstantin Abkhazi, celebrated general. He was a member of the parliament. He'd participated in drafting of a first Georgian constitution. And after the takeover of Georgia by the Bolshevik Russia in 1921, he stayed there in order to lead the anti-Soviet insurgency. all those who were fighting against Bolshevik army after takeover were persecuted, shot dead or imprisoned or sent to Siberia. Konstantin stayed there to continue fight. We know that Nicholas enlisted into the Georgian army in 1918. Nicholas, as a military man, together with other militaries who fought Bolshevik army, they had to leave. And actually they left for France. His mother, Elena Ioseliani, was also a prominent figure and was very active in charity works. He was asked by his father to take care of his mother. And he lost both his father and his mother then. And I suppose it was kind of glimpse of hope when he met Peggy Pemberton in France.
We are in the reading room of the University of Victoria Libraries, Special Collections and University Archives. We acquire the documentary history of the region. We acquire materials for teaching and research, and these are rare and unique materials. These are primary sources. It's the raw material of history. We are looking through the archives of Peggy and Nicolas Abkhazi.
What does that say there? A certificate granted by the Georgian Assembly of Nobility.
To the hereditary princely title of Abkhazis, who were
Granted the title in 1821.
His father was executed in 1923 by the Russians. So he was sent off to safety to Paris, France, and there he became a French citizen. And he was fighting for France in the Second World War.
In 3 days, the Germans' armored force reached the Meuse River, 2 days faster than the French thought any troops could get through.
He was caught by the Germans south of Paris at Bourges, and then he was put in a cattle car and taken up to a prisoner of war camp, a labor camp outside of Hanover in northwest Germany. And there he was given this number, and this symbolizes such terror and horrific humanity. It amazes me that they kept these symbols, because in some ways you'd think they just want to get rid of it and have that behind them, but obviously they kept it throughout their lives, and it ended up here as a remembrance of the horrific time he had.
He experienced horrors of war, and he experienced the horrors of prisoner of war camp.
And then they decided that prisoners over 40 would be sent back to Paris, so he was back in a train back to Paris, where he had to eke out a living because it was German occupied.
And that's where he and Peggy met.
They met in the early 1920s.
Okay.
When they were both in their early 20s in Paris. She was studying to be a concert pianist.
Yes.
And he was there as a refugee from Georgia, but he was studying law and economics there. One night where Peggy was staying, he was invited over for dinner, and that's how they met. And it was decided at this dinner table that he could escort Peggy out around the city. So then they spoke in the common language of French and explored the gardens, the art galleries, and concerts together, and developed a really good friendship and kept in touch over the years. Yeah. So when this horrific stuff was over, he was interned first, and then she, I don't know, was it 8,000 kilometers away, was interned in China.
For some, there was refuge inside the international settlement, where Japan was afraid to bomb the property and people of the foreign powers, just yet. But there was not room for all. And for each who found safety inside, there were thousands huddled beyond the gates, standing helpless and undefended.
memo is issued in conjunction with the official Japanese Consulate General notice ordering you to live in the Civil Assembly Center. Property is to be disposed of, baggage to be brought to specific places on day of assembly.
I think access to original material can be very profound for people because it's not just an image. You can see the details, you can see the surfaces, you can understand how things were made, how they were compiled, and it's very hard to convey that in a two-dimensional form.
So would this be an armband? Is she
That
wearing-
would be an armband.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's some related documentation here as well.
Oh my goodness.
Ah,
Well, I mean, you can't help but have a
yes.
you can't help but have a reaction to that because I mean she would have worn that for a long time. So yeah. You know, look at this. It's like hand sewn.
I know. And the snaps that would go around.
I wonder what a bee means. Must have been a pretty significant meaning to that.
Yeah. When we're looking at something like an armband, we're looking at a piece of evidence from the past. So, for instance, we look at Peggy Abkhazi's armband from her internment. It gives us an idea of how these people were controlled and identified. It potentially is a very rich entry point to understanding the greater context of her experience.
We started an Artist in a Garden program a couple of years ago, and so it's really great that you're here today. The Abkhazis created something very artistic, and so to me this is a place of art, so to have you here is very natural. So thank you for coming. She was interned by the Japanese for 2 years, 5 months, and 5 days. And after that after she got out of there, where did she come? She came back to Victoria to be with her good friends, the Mackenzie family. So she decided in March of 1946 to buy this property for $1,850. She had it cleared, she had a fence put up, and she hired an architect named John Wade. And John designed this. He was a modernist, and he liked to design buildings to fit within the landscape it fit in. So he did that for the summer house here and then for the house. They didn't even know if each other survived.
Right.
But he sent a letter to her after the war, to the last address he had for her in Shanghai, and somehow through the Red Cross it made its way to Victoria, where she was staying with her good Canadian friends. And in that letter, it said that he was going to New York and would she meet him there sometime. Right. So we always ask people, what big decision did she make?
Yeah. Yeah.
She went. September 4th, 1946, and by September 7th, they're engaged to be married on the Empire State Building.
Tallest of New York structures and the tallest in the world is the amazing Empire State Building. It rears its 103-story head 1,250 feet over the sidewalks below.
They had to go through many difficulties, many challenges, through horrors of internment camps, through destruction in Europe, in order to find each other and to start new life in Canada. Canada was kind of hope for both of them to again, not to start new life, but to go back to the normal life.
They came back here and got married at the legislature and in a church, had a little reception at the Empress Hotel, and then they boarded in a house on Pemberton Street, and they'd walk here every day to this summer house where they'd fix their breakfast and lunch and plan their garden together.
The Abkhazi story is significant for a number of reasons. tells us a little bit about a very unique experience of persons that came to this land. So how they established a life here in Victoria, how they modified the land, how that land changed, how they became involved in the society in Victoria and the significance of that garden over time.
სიმბოლურია საქართველოს დამოუკიდებლობის აღდგენის გამოცხადება 9 აპრილს, ვინაიდან ამ დღეს გადაწყდა საქართველოს ბედი. 9 აპრილის წამებულთა სულები დაგვცქერიან ჩვენ და ხარობენ ზეციურ ნათელში, რამე თუ აღსრულდა ნება მათი, აღსრულდა ნება ქართველი ერისა, გაუმარჯოს დამოუკიდებელ საქართველოს.
I'm Marianne, and I'm curator of the Costume Museum, and these are some of our volunteers.
It would be very mild, very diplomatic to say that not many Canadians know about Georgia. Only shared heritage that Georgia and Canada have. It's Abkhazi Garden.
When they were getting older, they were concerned about what would happen to this garden. Although they were private people, they had their garden open to the public, and the public enjoyed it and really liked it. They just had to close the gate so the dogs didn't get out. Now we're always closing the gate so the deer don't get in. Nicholas died in 1987 and Peggy 1994, and the head gardener in 1999 decided it was too much to keep up, and so he put it up for sale.
I used to live next door to the garden. We had moved in the summer of 1999. We knew there was some famous garden next door to our house that a princess had owned, and that was very captivating for us. So when the surveyor said that there is going to be 12 townhouses going in next door, it didn't make sense. So I started researching the garden and found out just how significant it is and how well known it had been in the community and beyond. This is what started as the campaign to save Abkhazi Garden. So I started a petition and popped my baby and my 1.5-year-old into a stroller, and I went around to all of the neighbors with this petition, asking the City of Victoria to stop the rezoning process. Connected to a couple of really significant people, Helen Curry and Judith Brand, and one of them, I think it was Helen, knew Cyril Hume. So I contacted the developer and asked if our group wanted to purchase the garden to preserve it, would he be willing to sell it? He wrote back to me to say yes, he would sell. The price would be $1.5 million. We're phoning media. Of course, the garden and the green space and the beautiful design of the garden, all of those things were important. But this story of the Abkhazis and their overcoming hardship and overcoming that and creating such a beautiful place despite everything that they'd gone through, that really captured the imagination, I think, of the community.
The community rose up, and we just supported that to make sure that we could protect it for the community.
I think it was Cyril Hume that said it so nicely. This property is already developed. It's fully developed as a garden. Nothing more needs to happen here.
My father and I were the same way. When we made something or other, we always hoped that it would get passed on. And when I came to the gardens in 2000, it needed passing on. It was in bad shape. And I thought I could do something. So whatever sort of came up on my weekly day, I would try to do.
I think I'm inspired by the fact that we all come together as volunteers and give it our best shot. You know, the gardeners really are amazing, and what they've done to it since I came 20 years ago, it's really been transformed.
Their lives connecting to the war is very much like what's happening now around the world. And the fact that they were, shall I say, lucky enough to find a place that they could both come to and sort of escape from the world's troubles, their previous lives. Hopefully that will happen to other people right now.
This is a unique site of war memory, a spectacular one, but it's just really important to know that war has happened and what happens to these people's lives. They could have both died many times over during the Second World War, but they managed to survive it and then thrive by building this garden. And it's important for people to see that kind of journey.
There's thousands of gardens that we simply go because it's beautiful, but also because it was Monet's garden. It was the Abkhazi Garden. We simply go there to see what they did. And if it's been nicely looked after, it's just as enjoyable as the day they made it.
We are grateful to those people here, these marvelous people, to the Land Conservancy of British Columbia, to wonderful volunteers, to friends of Abkhazi Garden, to wider community of Victoria, who saved, maintained, preserved this garden and are taking care of it now. They're maintaining that legacy and memory of Peggy and Nicolas. And by doing this, they're maintaining a piece of history.